Good morning, everybody, and thanks so much for joining us once again for Mondays with Mark. Just our usual housekeeping announcements before we get started. If you have any questions or anything anything you want answered or topics you wanted to have discussed by our guest today, feel free to go ahead and use that chat function, the little conversation bubble that's on your screen. You can go ahead and type it in. We'll make sure to monitor that. Or you can go ahead and raise your hand, use the little smiley face emoji with the hand next to it raised, and you can unmute yourself and ask it verbally when we get time for that. But without any further ado, I want to turn it over to our host, as usual, for his show, our district director here in Rhode Island, Mark Hayward.
Thank you very much, Matthew. And before we begin, we have to extend congratulations to Matthew. He's going to be a dad for the second time coming next week. So that's really exciting. And certainly we're going to miss him. He's going to be gone just for a little while, but we're going to miss him. And there's going to be a number of people from the district office that are kind of filling in. But Mondays with Mark will continue. And Maggie, it's great to have you. I mean, the funny thing is Maggie Longo, who's we were just talking about, she was the director of operations at Harbor Lights.
Right.
And that, of course, everybody knows that facility. By the way, that's a beautiful facility, Maggie. Every time
the Wells have done a great job.
Yeah. Phenomenal.
Yep.
But that's not what we're talking to you about today. Maggie's kind of been that conduit, that glue between everybody, particularly in the hospitality business and everything above and beyond COVID. I mean, there's really no other way to describe you, Maggie, because every time that we had a problem as it related to hospitality, we turned to you. And I really think with the SBDC bringing you on board, it really made our lives a lot easier because of just your vast background of hospitality and what goes on and how it goes on. And it's kind of like, everybody says that hospitality is one of those industries, you kind of put everything in a bowl and it comes out to be a beautiful dish.
Right.
But Maggie, that in the overall discussion of hospitality and COVID has not been easy. And thank you for everything you've done.
Well, thank you, Mark. It's been, it's true. I'm the girl that knows a guy, which is, the big joke. So do you know, I know a guy. I have a guy for that. And that's been helpful, actually, as we navigate COVID. I joined the SBDC sort of at the beginning in midsummer of 2020, right when everyone was really trying to navigate the immediate disaster, and as we've moved through it, there's a lot of what's next. And we're spending a lot of time trying to get that organized. That's what we've been working on mostly lately.
Maggie, let's kind of walk back a little bit. By the way, somebody just put in the chat, Maggie is the queen of hospitality.
That's got to be a groupie.
So let's walk back to kind of the beginning when you started with the SBDC. It was in the middle of just chaos, to be very candid with you, and explain to us how your efforts at the SBDC really translated to what was happening in the hospitality industry.
Right. Well, no one knew what was next. And as they were trying to navigate the mandates that changed frequently, it was regular viewing to pay attention to Governor Raimondo and her daily briefings. It was a very trying time for all the businesses. And it was also a big learning curve, right? Because as hospitality businesses, as restaurateurs, they already had a lot of these practices in place, but they were never as accelerated. Like you didn't think about hand sanitizer, you didn't think about a face mask coming into your dining room. You did those things because you're trained to do those things, and that also impacts your ability to stay licensed, but it was just accelerated. And then the biggest challenge was the lack of cash. Most restaurants, and I don't think people know this, really run on very, very thin margins. And when it's not coming in, it's a big challenge. What I learned was a lot of the folks I worked with had really, I don't want to say lazy, but they had, paying attention to their P&Ls has sort of fallen to the wayside because things were great. 2019 was a great year. Beginning of 2020 was a great year, and then everything stopped, and it stopped dead.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. So that transition from everything stopping dead to the innovation of getting people back online. Listen, anybody who has listened to me over the last 2 years will know that my major concern, we are a hospitality state. All you have to do is
Mm-hmm.
look anywhere, and hospitality is all around us. And the fact that we need to continue to support hospitality. And I want you to address a couple of issues, because there are people out there that say, oh, these restaurants are doing wonderful. They're making money hand over fist. It goes to the point, Maggie, that you just said, is
Right.
hospitality lives on a thread. And there may be
100%.
some people who are making making more than what they anticipated, but they also converted and changed in that process. And I'd like you to talk about that.
Right. So, everything's gone up and we see it in our personal lives, right? You go to the supermarket and if you look in the meat case, you're horrified if you can find the cut that you're looking for. There was the big chicken wing debacle of 2021 where you couldn't get chicken. I mean, that was sort of it was a joke, but it wasn't a joke. As revenue has improved, and I'm not going to say it's gone up because we haven't recovered from 2019 levels. It's better. Businesses are better, obviously, than they were in 2020, but all the expenses of running a restaurant, from the cost of goods sold to their bottom line expenses, have increased at a rate that they've never experienced. And yes, some of the big organizations are doing great. They also have stronger bottom lines.
Right.
The big corporate restaurants are fine. I'm going to say fine, probably not true, but I'll say fine as compared to the typical small local restaurant or cafe.
But in Rhode Island, we have more of those local small cafes. What advice have you been giving them over the last 2 years on how to not only maneuver through COVID-19, but to be successful?
Right. Well, they need to reinstitute things that they hadn't done in a long time. They need to look at their P&L. I like to look at them weekly, but I'm strange like that. They should look at it at least monthly. They need to look at it. They need to perform inventories. They need to make certain that their expenses are in line. And they need to use some of the tools that we know how to use that they probably haven't used, from as simple as a declining checkbook to really doing projections again and comparing and trying to track it to see if you're really making those numbers.
Maggie, I always say that, we have people come to us and say, hey, listen, I can eat, so that means I can open up a restaurant. No, that's not essentially what I can cook. Well, that's great, but that doesn't give you the qualities to open a restaurant. And I know, Maggie, that you've been working with a lot of people trying to get them to the point where, look beyond where you are today and try to figure out where to get to tomorrow. As an SBDC consultant, you have been the point person as it relates to hospitality. What are you telling people?
I'm telling them that they need to evaluate everything and they need to make decisions really based on their revenue streams. So, your favorite menu item maybe doesn't sell. It really has to go. It's no longer cost effective. You have to think about how you're scheduling your team members, your labor. There's different ways to navigate that expense, from easy as bringing people in on a 15-minute slide as opposed to everyone starts at 7 or everyone starts at 6 or something. Any way that you can economize to help you get there. Mark, people still want to open restaurants. And I spend a lot of time with startups. And I think that the biggest surprise for them is the amount of prep required to even get to the point where we can write projections. Do you know your location? What's your menu look like? Have you thought about your cost of goods sold? Are you trained? Have you taken any of the training offered by the Hospitality Association? Because you need to be food safety certified. I mean, all these things are surprises. So it's the regular business owner has to go back and revisit all those things again.
Maggie, you've been working with Rhode Island Hospitality Association with Sarah and with Dale Venturini, and what kind of relationship has that been?
Well, I'm an original hospitality person. I've known Dale since she's probably been president, and I've known Heather Singleton since she came on board. I won their first Cook of the Year award, which was the beginning of the stars of the industry, way back in 89 or 90, some crazy time. Yeah. Well, we aren't going to talk about age. They have a lot of their members have a lot of fear. So part of what I'm able to offer them is, connection through to the SBDC and all the services that we offer, besides having access to me. We did a lot of work with the grant programs in the beginning, and that's where people were starting to learn that their records aren't in order. I mean, you and I have had those conversations.
Yep.
If it's not documented, we can't help you. The government can't help you right now, so we had to work our way through those things.
There's been a lot of discussion, Maggie, about, and nobody is saying that the grants are not good, that they're not helpful to people. So let's put that aside. But a lot of people are saying, listen, $5,000 just is not going to help me. And I mean, it will help, but it's not going to cure a lot of the issues that I've had or we've had. And I'll give you an example. There's a place that I go every Saturday and Sunday morning for breakfast. And I know the owner. It's a little diner, and we always have these conversations. And I said, and I'll use a fictitious name, Frank, you need to keep up with what's going on. And he says, well, the prices are just going off the wall, and I don't want to increase my prices for fear of losing people. And I said to him, Frank, listen, people are not going to come here because you increase your bacon and eggs by 50 cents. Right. I said, that's really important. And my concern, Maggie, and I know that you have worked a lot in this, I tell people all the time, if you get behind, playing catch up is not fun and also could be detrimental to the business itself. Can you address that?
100%. And going back to the comment about the fact that the anyone likes free money, right? It's always, is there a grant available? How
Right.
can you help me? They're anxious about taking on more debt, though the EIDL program has been a lifesaver for a lot of folks because, the interest rate is really favorable. We're, navigating the EIDL system, though, has gotten challenging recently, and we've been having some challenges there. Those small grants pay one bill. I know you have. I talk to Matt about it all the time. Those small grants pay one bill. Might pay your broadliner, might pay the bud guy, and that's really all it's going to take care of for you. It doesn't address the things that are still left on your balance sheet from 2020 and the beginning of 21, which really, all of 21 went like this. We were open, we were closed. We were doing things in a different way. So right. It's hard to see the light for the trees, you pay more in the supermarket. I advise all my clients that people see it now, it's affecting them personally. So that dollar bump that you might have to put on a menu item no one's going to push back. And the ones that push back aren't your long-term clients anyway.
Right, exactly. That's what I said. I go to this place. It's like, clockwork for many, many years, Saturday and Sunday, as long as I'm around. But, and I think, in talking to restaurateurs or hospitality in general, they're always trying to please the customers. And I understand that. The issue of take it outside has had its, well, first of all, we live in New England, so that sometimes can be complex at best.
Right.
Yesterday morning, it was 33 degrees early in the morning, so you can't really take it outside in those conditions unless you want to bundle up. And I know that you've worked a lot with hospitality and a lot of restaurateurs, and I just want to make one other comment. Dave LaHouse, I mean, when he first got the igloos and went across his parking lot and put them all in there, and because he had to recreate himself in order to continue the business flow. That's really, that's the kind of stuff, but that's all short term. That's not long term. And the expense, and I know that you dealt with this, the expense that a lot of restaurants had in taking it outside. Listen, al fresco dining is great, and it's great in the summer.
Right. Well, we like the shoulder seasons too, as long as we can make it comfortable for the diners, right? It's personally, I think that the loosening of the laws around outdoor dining is one of the best things that came out of the pandemic.
And alcohol.
Yes. And, the Hospitality Association has been working on preserving that. So it's now preserved, I think, till the end of 2023, and they feel pretty confident it's going to continue. Because, it's not an impact to a liquor store. They limit the amount you can take, and you have to purchase food. I like the outside portion. The challenge is getting the supplies. So one of the big efforts that the Hospitality Association did was as simple as they bought a bazillion blankets. I don't know if you came through Dale's. I was there packing and labeling blankets.
Yep.
But a ton of blankets, heaters, and there's monies available again now in the program, though there's been some hesitancy, I think, from the organizations because they can't administer the programs. So I'm a little nervous about that.
So, I mean, we live in an area of the country that it's not conducive to being outside all of the time. But how, and at the very beginning of this and listening to Dale and others, in fact, we testified before the House Small Business Committee at one point in time, and the discussion was, and I'll never forget this, it was one of the restaurateurs said, it's all great, it's all fine, we can take it outside until it rains.
Right.
And then things become a little bit more difficult. So if everything has to be outside, then we have issues. I was, and the other thing is being the ability to spread people out within a facility.
Right.
But there comes a point in time, Maggie, you've talked to a lot of people about where does break even come?
Right. And break even is based on butts and seats in a restaurant and most hospitality businesses, even in the hotels, right? It's how many rooms are rented and what their average rate is. It's exactly the same thing in any of the hospitality businesses. And if they can't fill a seat, they do their projections or assume their viability based on how much money does this seat generate. And, that's the way we used to look at it back in the old days. Each seat's worth $20,000 to me a week, maybe for some of the bigger restaurants. And if I can't use that seat, I just lost $20,000.
What about turnover? Because a lot of people say, they've got to turn tables every X in order to be able to make Y at the end of the night.
100%. You're not a camper, are you, Mac? You don't sit there all night.
No, I'm not. Trust me. I get in, I eat, and I leave. I love that. You're not going to camp in this restaurant. Actually,
no. I used to be really good at inviting guests to the bar.
my that's very good. My wife and I went to a B&B. Well, not B&B. Bring your own BYOB. In Bristol. And, we had a certain time that we came in, and the people who before us were a little bit late. So I was very conscious about not going over the time that we can, stay there because we knew that they were going to turn it one more time that evening. But I don't think everybody is like me that's conscious about, being able to get out on time. But you're right. Camping causes issues.
I mean, it's an art to run a dining room. Right. It's an art to run a schedule, to run the reservation book. That has improved for a lot of owners because they've gone to online reservation systems. And there's often a disclaimer. If you use Resi or if you're, booking a table through Square, you'll see where it says you're allowed 90 minutes or you're allowed an hour and 15 minutes, and then you got to bounce. So it's a very, that helps generate money. On the weekends, most places are busy. Particularly if the weather's good. People are starting to go out. They're, not as nervous. If there's still some restaurants that have vaccine mandate, you have to show your vaccine card in order to enter, and that's okay. If it doesn't seem to impact them. Where they're lagging is during the week. So they're trying to drive that revenue during the week because business downtown, particularly downtown restaurants, is still not, we're still working from home.
How do you do that, Maggie? How do you drive that revenue in that business during the week with restrictions? Because it becomes more of you need to incentivize people to come out.
Right. Or you need to figure out a way to get the food to the people. I'm not a fan of third-party delivery services. They are usury in their fees that they charge, and some of their practices seem deceitful to me. But there's other ways, there's during COVID, a local comes almost all the way to me on the other side of Patuxent Village delivery service that's rather inexpensive to use downtown. Can you get the food to the people? Can you still do some small office catering for the folks who come in? Can you offer a frequent flyer card at lunch at some of the restaurants? Or do you need to make the decision that it's better to close at lunch and just try your, from 4 o'clock on during the week?
Maggie, do you know any delivery services that are being fair to the hospitality industry? Because I know that this has been a huge controversial
Right.
discussion. And personally, I think, for people I mean, the margins are thin enough, and
Right.
to cut it again and should there be delivery fees?
Yes, I think that a restaurant should charge a delivery fee. I think we're okay with paying that as a consumer. I don't think that that's the challenge. The big players in the game, the percentage they charge the businesses is much too high. I know there's some legislation moving kind of on the hill, but it hasn't gotten very far yet. They're trying to limit what someone can charge a business. One or two of them have voluntarily said, oh, instead of 30, just think about this. Instead of the 30% we're taking, we'll only take 20 or 25. I have businesses that would have been bottom line black except for delivery fees. They lost over 30% of their revenue.
Why do they feel that they have to use the delivery services? Do they think that they can't make it otherwise?
Well, yes. And some of them are small businesses. There's a lot of businesses that launched during the pandemic or had just launched that are ghost kitchen based, and that's a whole nother thing. I like the idea of a ghost kitchen. I don't necessarily like the big corporate players. I think there's other ways to think about it. And it might be a really great use of vacant space in cities and towns, quite honestly. But
do you think we're back yet, Maggie?
Not yet. I think it's going to be 2023 before people feel as though they are back to pre-pandemic levels. That's my gut.
Yeah, and you and I chatted over at PPAC when we had that press conference over there, and I think we talk about restaurateurs but we don't talk about venues like PPAC and Trinity and whatever. There's a lot out there, by the way.
Right.
Actually, we did have a lot of shuttered venue grants because they impact the restaurant.
They absolutely. Oh, 100%. Because when there's a big show in town, they do shows maybe for the week, maybe for 10 days. So the restaurants around, particularly around the theater district that we have, are quite busy, all during that time. And they look forward to a busy theater season because we have one in Rhode Island.
Yep.
It's very impactful, though I see that that's starting to change. I see that the team over at PPAC have got a pretty full calendar for the next season.
They do, and we work very closely with the PPAC people, with Judy and Lynn and a whole bunch of people, and they're just wonderful. They really are dedicated people to getting, the arts here in Providence, and I think that's wonderful. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, we're at 11:23, so we have 7 minutes left with our guest today. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat or raise your hand. We're more than happy to have Maggie answer any questions that you have. Maggie, and you and I had a little bit of a side discussion before we came on air about what's going on today. The fact that we do have a new variant, that it seems like numbers are going up. They're not going up dramatically, but they are continuing to rise. I think we're at the point with, okay, let's live our life. We don't, and I think a lot of people have said, we're going to have to live with this and we're going to have to manage through this. And my concern is, not to, particularly for hospitality, to shut things down again. What are you hearing and what's your recommendation?
They're nervous. I can't say that businesses aren't nervous, particularly because there's, like we discussed earlier, over the weekend, there's been this big thing, there's a problem, what's coming, what if we have to go? Some communities I know are putting mandates back in place. I haven't heard anything here in Rhode Island yet. I think that if it happens and there are restrictions again, that it will lead to the closure of a lot of businesses that are just hanging on and are hopeful for a great summer season, particularly the ones that are located in those kinds of communities. I am hopeful it doesn't happen. I mask, I have to tell you, I'm traveling soon to see my mother. She's almost 83. I've only seen her once during the pandemic. She lives in another state. So I've been masking pretty steadily the last month or so because I haven't gotten it. which is,
Go knocking on wood again.
amazing. I think that there's anxiety associated with the fact that there's noise about a new variant. Yes.
Yeah, and listen, I certainly I don't like what the CCP does, locking everybody down, and I don't think it really helps in locking anybody down here either.
Right.
And people need to make their own decision. I think if you want to go out and you, like you said, you mask,
Right.
and if I go out and I don't mask and I take that risk, then I'm taking the risk. But I think the point that you made, that we have so many people who are on very thin margins right now, we can't, just a little bit will tip them over the other side. I keep telling people that, and people say, "Oh no, everybody's fine." No, they're not.
That's not true. I mean, I'm going to tell you, if you can frequent any hospitality business, any theater, if you can go. If you're not comfortable going, do takeout. Please drive by and pick it up yourself if you can on your way home, or, for the weekend, as opposed to letting a delivery service do it. But engage. Otherwise, we're going to lose more businesses.
Yeah, and I think that's really critical, and people have to understand that, because we are at a point where we need to get beyond this.
Right.
We need to understand where we are and understand the impact on the hospitality. And I when I talk about hospitality, Maggie, I always talk about hospitality and small retail, because they're also caught up in this kind of like this cycle where we have a gerbil that keeps going around and around and around. And we need to, and I say this to everybody, and I will continue to say, shop small.
Right.
I know that there are a lot we are very blessed, because we have a lot of great restaurants and a lot of great small shops right here within the confines of Little Rhode. And I will tell you, we need to take advantage of that. If you don't want, like Maggie said, if you don't want to go out and eat in the restaurant, and by my wife is more like you than she is like me, I'd be happy to go out, but she's very concerned about how and when she does it. We do it, I mean, on occasion, but we'll do takeout a lot. Support your small restaurants, support your small businesses, because, ladies and gentlemen, the bottom line is they are the ones that are keeping this state running. And it's really critical. We're at 11:28, by the way, Maggie. We're almost done.
Okay.
And if anybody's got any questions, please raise their hand. Matt, is there any questions in the chat, other than the fact that Maggie is the queen?
I used to have a license plate that said Queen Bee back in the day when I worked for a small local restaurateur.
Now, lots of well wishes and compliments from Maggie in there, so you can go ahead and make sure you pay them for their service on this after. But no, we did have one question that folks hadn't thought about, places that do rentals for events like tables, chairs, things like that, and they were wondering, because we talked about when the restaurant hospitality industry might be back to full, and you said 2023 full recovery. What about businesses like this that do those event rentals and whatnot? What about when they might see full recovery, kind of?
I'll tell you that I'm still friendly with some of the team over at Harbor Lights, and I was talking to their banquet manager over the weekend, and they are fully committed to a level that's pretty impressive for weddings, in particular this season, which means all the auxiliary vendors, not the caterers or the tables and chairs, though I heard that Peak isn't taking any more engagements for the season, Peak Event Rentals, which means that they're fully committed for the season.
Oh.
And that's pretty impressive. So I think that to me, they're going to have a great season. Again, it's impactful, because we saw what happened when it changes and all of a sudden things cancel, people work stops overnight. So that's important that it continues to operate.
And Maggie, while we've concentrated on restaurants, we've talked a lot about restaurants and that we're also talking generally about musicians and music and DJs,
florists,
limo services, florists, and that's
companies, lighting guys, the whole nine yards.
Exactly. And when I talk about small retail, that's what I'm talking about. Everything. Even the small gift shops. I mean, everything is related in one way or another to the hospitality industry, just generally. And I just, we
Well, in
need,
Rhode Island, I mean, this is who we are, right? It's like in the top 3 employers in the state. So that
know,
encompasses all those things. So that's, you want us to stay, right? This is what makes Rhode Island special, our small businesses and our flair.
yeah, unfortunately, we're at the end. I wanted to talk a little bit about employment and getting
Oh,
employees,
boy.
but
Well, we can do that another time,
we
or
can, Maggie. You're absolutely right. Thank you, everyone, for
thank
joining
you,
Mondays with
everybody.
Mark. Maggie, thank you very much for being